Hello, everyone, and welcome to another ARG Presents Ultra event.
Oh, come on. Don't oversell
It's an Ultra event. My name's Amigo Aaron, your good buddy and your good pal. Joined by a man who's not your buddy. He doesn't really want to get involved with you, but he's here anyway. It's the Brent.
I'm more like that guy. I'm a wingman. I'm a wingman to the show. I'm gonna pump you up. Like, yeah, good show.
When are you gonna get the show hooked up with something better? Is what my question is.
Well, like you keep coming back.
You're a bad wingman.
You've got the keys to the place.
Yeah. So, in case you joined us 2 weeks ago,
What?
here it is.
Oh.
It's the wheel. We spun this sucker. We made a deal. And this is an exciting deal, I think,
Yeah,
Brent.
it wasn't bad.
Because this week we're going to look at games on and the system that was the GP32, Games Park 32, an early handheld with a lot of interesting promise that wasn't quite achieved, but it did change some things, I think, as these sorts of handhelds went. Before we get into it, since we're talking about a handheld here, because it got me to thinking, we've had handhelds, obviously, since I was a little kid. Before there were even, before we had video games, we were playing the little handheld games where you had water and blew rings over something, or had, you shot marbles up into a maze to do something, or you rocked something around.
Sure.
And then eventually, of course, you got to the point where you got the liquid crystal display games.
Electronic football, baby.
Yeah, electronic football, LED stuff. And then even the little car that had the screen that had like the paper that rotated around.
Well, that was more like the bubble thing.
When you look back, and because I know some of these things were before your time, but
Right.
you probably
you
probably handled with a lot of them.
Yeah, I did.
But can you think of what you enjoyed pre-Game Boy?
Oh, yeah.
Like when you were in the car, what were you doing?
The electronic football.
The
That was so good. That was it. If for those who aren't familiar, think of maybe a Game Gear sized device that had buttons for up, down, left, right, and pass on both sides. So you could lay it on a table and play two-player on it.
Well, no, one side had defense, and one side had offense, but there were different buttons on defense.
Right. And,
yeah.
But you could play it single player, no problem.
Yeah.
And I played the heck out of that game. It was. You had just dashes for men, and it ran 3 wide. There were 3 columns.
Yeah, 3 wide. Yeah.
And you could pass. That's what made it great.
Yeah.
And
that was rare in those games too.
And passing was the worst idea ever because there were like 4 defenders, right? And you could only go 3 columns wide. So you almost always had a defender in your path. But getting along, because the thing was like 10 long.
Segments, yeah.
Throwing one of those for like 8 or 9 segments deep was the best feeling.
Yeah.
The best. And here's the thing. I vividly remember playing it. I don't vividly remember playing a lot of stuff, but I vividly remember playing that.
That was a game that came from Radio Shack. That was one that they sold. They sold some really good handheld games. I liked playing the handheld baseballs as well. Those were fun, and some of those got really advanced. I own one that's incredibly advanced. So advanced I'd probably never play it.
Yeah,
it's insane. I mean, you could literally program in stuff on it. It's one of the last ones they made. When you graduated up, because you did have a Game Boy.
Yes.
Back in the day, like when after playing games in the car that you use water to blow crap up on. And marbles. What's it like? Because I was sort of tardy at the party on the Game Boy. What was it like to hold this thing in your hand and be able to walk around with it?
Well, here's something that needs to be noted. Because all those physical games where you're either, playing with the marbles, or it's all horses racing around the track and you bet on which one you think's going to win, that kind of stuff. But it's all gears, right?
Yeah.
I love those. So much so that if you remember, at Boat Fest, not last year, but the year before that, Pajako had bought a ton of those to play with on the plane ride over. I bought them instantly.
What'd you do with them?
I've got them in my house. I've got some of them up on display.
Oh,
I love them. I absolutely love them.
You got a display case at your house with those games in it?
Some of them, Dude,
I gotta see that.
Those are games from my childhood. Now, don't get me wrong, the Game Boy, awesome. Game Boy Advance was my handheld of choice.
Yeah.
And obviously graduating from those marble games, which I had a few as a kid. I've got more now than I've ever had as a child.
Yeah.
Was a huge step. And obviously the Game Boy Advance was way better than the marble games.
Yeah,
but
no kidding.
there's something about that physical gear nature and hearing those things crank.
Because some of them you had to wind them up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Cranking those things up. And they were really innovative.
Yeah.
They were trying to do a lot with a little.
And those things are like one of your original impulse buys as a kid. They would always cunningly put those at the checkout line.
Yeah.
You know, so could you pay like they were probably $4.
Yeah,
something
$3
like
or
that,
$4.
And you get one, and your mom was sometimes you get if she's an easy touch, and I'd have a bunch of these things strewn around the back seat back in the day. But when you got the Game Boy in your hand,
Right.
First of all, did mom and dad just buy that arbitrarily, or did you ask
No,
for it?
I got that as a Christmas present.
I see. So you asked for that.
Oh, yeah.
And do you remember did you get any games with it when you first got it?
I think I got one of the wrestling games that was on it,
Ooh.
and Monopoly.
Oh yeah, I think you did have Monopoly.
And of course, Tetris came with it. Tetris is what I played the most.
Well, yeah.
All my carts got stolen when I was in college.
I remember that,
unfortunately, because Monopoly's
You lived in a camper, Brent. That's what happened.
decent amount of money now.
Yeah. You're kidding.
No, because it's
I can't remember. Was it any good?
It was okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you could cheat the trading system because the AI was kind of dumb, but it was a way to play Monopoly by yourself, which that was the main thing. Of course, I had more love. The GBA was great, or the Game Boy was great, but the GBA, Game Boy Advance, was next level.
Except for the lack of the backlight was a real bummer.
Yeah, well, but that coming from the Game Boy, I was already used to that.
Now let me ask you: did you ever own any non-Nintendo handhelds?
Owned? No. I played a lot of Game Gear because one of my buddies had one, but no, I never owned any other handheld up until when I was an adult, I got a PSP.
Right. So it's funny we should go down this road, and we've mentioned this before because me and Britt both, and I think you got yours at the urging of me.
Yeah.
We both own something from Game Park Holdings, which is sort of a different company, but sort of. We'll get into it. Called the GP2X.
Yeah.
Which we both. In fact, get this. I dug mine out this week. The joystick nub's missing, but the little stick is still there, so you can still play on it. But it's still fired up. I put batteries in it, fired up. Screen still looks okay. But we both own the sequel to this, but we never actually owned it. But I did hear about the sequel quite a bit, which I'll get into. And this was the first handheld system I think I ever owned. I don't
there
think
you
I
go.
was
Man,
the GP2X.
You were an adult by then.
I was
way adult.
I was a cheap adult. And so there you go. So let's go ahead and get into it, the Brent.
I have a story about the GP2X.
Okay, very good. Do you want to tell it before we get into the GP32?
Yeah, because it's not relevant to the system.
All right, go ahead.
When I bought my GP32,
No.
or my GP2X,
Yes.
sorry, I bought it because, of course, you couldn't walk into a store and get them because they were all Korean handhelds. So you had to buy them off of questionable websites.
Lip Sang or whatever, yeah.
So when I bought mine, the guy was like, all right, boom, done. And I paid with my money, and it never came. I was like, hey, what the heck's going on? And the dude was it was down.
Yeah.
So I reached out to him personally, and he's like, oh, sorry, man, we got bought out. You've got to deal with blah, blah, blah now. I was like, listen, I was like, I'm going to contact my government officials if you don't give me my money back right now. I'm not dealing with someone else. I don't care if it comes out of your pocket now.
Yeah.
And he actually was like, arr, and backed off and gave me a refund, and I bought it from somewhere else.
Yeah.
But it was a crooked...
Do you remember what it cost? Do you remember what that thing cost when we bought it? I don't remember. To save my life.
I don't... it was over $100.
Yeah. They weren't the cheapest thing. So with that, and of course, I had to buy them the same way. So with that in mind, let's delve into the realm of the GP32. Now, this is a funny system. I'm going to talk about where I first heard about this to get the ball rolling. Because the only reason I know about this at all, I'm going to once again mention Shane R. Monroe from Retro Gaming Radio back in the day. The first podcast I ever listened to before they were called podcasts. Apple wasn't involved, nothing like that. This was a periodically released retro gaming show that was on in the late 90s. So it traces way back. And Shadon Monroe was a guy who was an Amiga guy, he was an arcade guy. I had a lot in common with him. I really enjoyed his show. He's still making shows today. He does a show called Passenger Seat Radio now. He did a retro gaming radio, came back for a little while, but it went down again because it was changed. It's not in the retro gaming thing anymore. But I listen to his shows occasionally. I've tried to interview this guy like 20 times, but he always agrees, but he never gets around to me. So that's the way it goes. I get that. But anyway, he kept talking about this handheld device that would let him play emulators. This seemed like a crazy concept to me at first, but when I was working at Lexmark, I worked with a guy named Shaggy. God bless this guy; he's passed away. But Shaggy was a real high concept thinker, and this was back when MP3s were starting to really be a big deal, and he wanted to have MP3s in his car, and so he literally installed a full computer in his trunk. And then rigged it up somehow to have a small monitor in the front seat and a mouse. And he would use, I swear to you, he had this set up. It's a lot like the people that installed those multi-CD changers in their cars.
Yeah.
Like 2 weeks later, it's like, hey, you can store all that in this SD card. They're like, no.
Yeah, exactly.
I believe you had one of those, come to think of, a CD changer back in the day.
Not a car one. I had a house one, yeah.
So I thought, man, I was like, oh, heck, if Shaggy could pull this off, maybe they can do something. So I heard Shane go on and on and on about the GP32, and then when the GP2X came, he was like, I'm going to upgrade to one of these, and that's when I ended up buying mine, and I followed his instructions to where to go to get it and how to get it going, and there was an English-speaking following for the GP2X, and there was for GP32 as well, but that's how we were both introduced into it, so let's get into it here. The manufacturer of the GP32, Game Park was a South Korean company. So get this, and this is a little bit of a history lesson. Probably a lot of people know this. After the war, Korea had a law that would not let you bring in anything made in Japan.
Yeah.
So for example, there was no Nintendo in Korea. There was no nothing like that. But they would let local Korean manufacturers sort of like bring them in. So there might be a Samsung version of the Saturn, for example, or something like that. So Game Park saw an opening to make a handheld, which makes sense. And so Game Park's a little company that was, I think they debuted in '96. They've been around all that long. When they eventually released the Game Park GP32 in November of 2001. So 2001, if you think back, this is when this released. They think, now this, I wonder about this figure. According to Wiki and a couple other places I looked, it says they shipped 32,000 GP32s, which the majority of those would have been in South Korea. Yeah. Because this never officially was distributed outside of South Korea in the United States or anywhere else. So any people that were there had to pull them in themselves. Their plan was, okay, we're going to have a South Korean handheld game console that will work for our people since we don't have anything cooking otherwise. Well, the problem is that not too long after the GP32 came out, that the rule that abolished people from doing that was they got rid of it, and so then Japan they could start buying stuff after that.
Floodgates open.
Yeah, and so they sort of got screwed on that. But so it came to pass. It was the GP32. So I've never personally handled a GP32, but they're very similar in some ways to GP2X, but white. They had. It was a handheld, much like at a Game Boy Advance. It had the two rear shoulder buttons. It was sort of molded the same way. It was, and like I said, they were white. And you had different varieties. But at the heart of these things, you had a 3.5-inch display that would do 320 by 240 pixels. The CPU is a Samsung S3C 2400. And this thing was quite nice. It was overclock. Overclock you built into the machine because I had emulators that let you set the overclock on the fly. It had 8 megabytes of SD RAM and 512K of ROM. It had 44.1 16-bit sound, 4-channel sound, which was nice. It had a storage component that was dubbed a smart media. Think of like a bigger SD card, like a bigger and wider. It was 128 megabyte storage.
Woo.
That wasn't that much.
That was huge back in the day.
And it ran, you could hook this up with a DC adapter or 2 AA batteries. Now, one thing I will say about the GP32 that it had over the GP2X, this thing could run a lot longer on 2 AA's. It says here that it's rated between 6 and 12 hours. And the GP2X, if we ever get around to it, it chewed batteries up for dinner. It went to work on batteries.
Yeah, well, the processor in the GP32 or the GP2X was a lot beefier than the 32.
It also, some of the peripherals that came with it, it had a thing called the GP Link, which is a wireless dongle that you could use to chat with other players and play online games. And there were games that you could only get online, which I thought was interesting. The machine was more powerful than the Game Boy Advance.
Yeah.
But it did have, originally it had the same problem that the Game Boy Advance had. It's not a problem, it's just the way it was released. It didn't have any backlight, which is always a bummer. And so you get into that weird world where you're putting accoutrement on your machine. In fact, I remember when I sold some stuff one of the things I sold that you had was this gimmick that fit on the
magnifier
front.
and the light.
Yeah, those things. Your Game Boy looks like a Swiss Army doodad.
Yep.
So the original one had no light. Then they released one that had what was called a front light, right? So it provided its own light via a transparent panel that sat between the LCD display and the plastic cover screen. So effectively, it's a light that hooks on the front at the factory.
Yeah.
You can imagine what that was like. And then eventually...
Probably had a few hot spots.
And eventually, they finally released a version in 2004 that was the BLU, which stood for backlight unit. This one had a backlight, but the difference was this thing the screen wasn't 100% compatible with the other ones. And so they had to... so there was some wackery in there. And there were some other things on it that they changed, updated.
Not good.
Well, when you start doing that, and there were there were some non-standard other versions that were in there that got into. So anyway, you can imagine how that went. So you're probably asking yourself, well, this all sounds amazing, but what was the plan here? Well, I'm going to tell you the plan. This was going to be like originally. They were going to make this like a Game Boy Advance or a Game Boy. They were going to have companies make cartridges, and you were good to go.
Yeah.
But they had a gimmick. They had an angle.
We call it the backup plan.
This was the front plan.
It was. Really, it was. Yeah.
And the plan was, hey, we're going to make this a completely open system. There's no copy protection. And every unit that we sell can be a developer unit. Anyone can develop on these. And they figured they would get so much action that way, and so many companies that were going to get on the low end because they could get in for free, that they'd have a ton of people making games, right? That makes sense, right? Well, at the end of the day, and this, by the way, I should mention, the length this thing was around, again, it started in November of 2001, so basically the end of 2001, and this was discontinued in 2005. So you basically that's not good. You've got basically 3 years in there.
That's not horrible.
Give or take. It's not the best.
It's not the best, but it's not horrible.
Well, here's why it's real bad. In around 3 years, a little 3 years plus, they had 28 official game releases. 28. All right, now what do you say, Smarty?
Well, you know.
It was bad. And almost all these were published by Game Park, which sounds a lot like some of the other low-end handhelds we've talked about in the past.
Here's the problem with everybody come work for our platform.
Yeah.
When your main selling point is, we don't have any copyright protection. Come on in. Developers are like, No.
Well, the media was...
No, I'm not going to do
You
that.
couldn't just dupe the media.
Oh,
you know?
come on
Now,
now.
I will tell you, and the GP32 had a different... the GP2X had an SD card. So
Yeah.
the 32 had a completely different card. But I can tell you right now, I never saw a single actual game for the GP32 or GP2X ever. I saw a demo of one once. So there were 28 titles released that ran from November 23rd, 2001, all the way to December 16th, 2004. So even in 2005, there were no titles released that whole year.
Yeah.
So like I said, you've got about a 3-year span. Now these do run the game, but there were a few of these that weren't published by Game Park, but they published most of them, and most of them are in are basically Korean. But some of them have. They had planned to release this in America and in English-speaking countries. They never got around to it. So I just read this. I was talking to Prentice before we came on the show. People were interested in doing work for the GP32. They were interested in this. They were like, man, this seems like a pretty good deal. And there was a plucky fan base for this. And I did catch the tail end of it with the GP2X. In fact, there's stuff still around. If you nose around, the forums and stuff are still up for the GP32. And it was a bunch of Americans and Europeans that had gotten into because the concept of the machine itself were good.
Yeah.
They were like, this is great, but Game Parks, why aren't you doing anything with this? Example, and this was on Wiki. I'd never heard this story, but I had to mention it. Team 17 apparently offered to port their games directly to the GP32 for free. All right, Team 17, Worms is one of their big properties, among others. And they demanded no money. They were going to do it for free, and all they asked was for 2 GP32 units so they could test their games. Game Park refused. Okay, they were not having it.
2 units? What are you talking? That's crazy talk.
In 2003, here's another one. The GP32 News, which is a French website, which I'd been to. I trained in early days. This is 2003, so this thing was already tanking. They were like, listen, why isn't this thing being featured at the Japanese Expo here in France? Because I guess Japan brings a lot of their stuff to France, your big electronic expo.
Sure.
So they wanted to publicize the GP32, and they wanted to show things at the thing. So they asked Game Park, can we get some funding so we could go and do your job? Game Park refused to fund the site. We're not doing that. They were not interested in doing it. And so, guess what? This thing didn't do all that well. But the funny thing that happened is, it's open source. Like, anyone can screw with it, right? So what happened? Well, the people that make emulators were like, wait a minute. I wonder if this thing can emulate some stuff. And they started making emulators for it. Lo, it came to pass that emulation started kicking up on the GP32, and that was the bread and butter of this machine, effectively. And the only reason anyone ever talked about these was because you could play Atari 2600 games on it, and some like lower end Neo Geo stuff, and some Genesis, and some that sort of thing. You could play some stuff with this game. The emulation was pretty good.
Yeah, it wasn't
on this, and so they were like, "Holy smokes, this is it! This is the way you get this thing over." And so, what this thing became famous for was all the emulators that came out for it. In fact, I was talking to Jack Flack last night, who owned one of these, by the way. He had a GP32. We were talking about it. He said it had a good screen, looked good. And he actually helped the Atari, I think it's the Atari emulator, he was helping them out with it. But this had a good emulation scene. That's what, and homebrew, stuff like that. That's what got over on it. So there was multitudes more games released that were emulated or homebrew than there were released games.
Yeah.
So when you think about and by the way, this continued directly into the GP2X. So let's talk about just what happened to Game Park. So, of course, they never released this over here, ever. And so in 2005, there was some sort of internal struggle that happened at Game Park about the direction of the company, right? So some people, I don't know how this works. Some people split off from Game Park to create Game Park Holdings. Game Park Holdings are the ones that released the GP2X, and then the ill-named GP2X Whiz that came out as sort of like the direct sequel to the GP2X. I hated that name. And by this time...
That's some Nintendo level naming right
well,
there.
the GP2X Whiz was like a much more thought out GP2X, basically. The GP2X Whiz was competing with a fan-made spin-off project called the Pandora Project, which
I remember that.
That's a whole other story right there.
That right here. Somebody wants to add a wheel piece. Get on it.
Someone needs to send me a Pandora too, because those things cost a ton. And so that's where one side released. The original Game Park announced this thing called the XGP. This was the direct successor to the GP32. I've never seen one of these. There's a reason. They also announced the XGP Mini, which had half the RAM of the XGP. Brilliant. Clearly going down the Commodore 16 path. Then they announced the XGP Kids for younger players. But unfortunately, none of these consoles ever were released. So they planned 3 consoles, each crappier than the last, before finally going bankrupt in March of 2007. And I love this bit. Only Wiki, someone had to be cute. It says, the web page is currently unavailable and was previously replaced by a website for a shoe store before it was taken down. So the GP shoe store was there. So that was the sad demise of what everyone says is quite a nice system. They're a good-looking system. It's a well-respected system. And this, as far as I know, and there could be some debate, because I don't know when they started putting emulation stuff on the GBA. I know they did, but I don't know what year.
It was a little later in the
game.
But
I think this would probably be the earliest emulation handheld you were ever going to find. I didn't know about any other ones. And so if you know about another one, feel free to drop a comment in the chat or under the video here. But I think this was the King Dong back in the day. So at the end of the day, the South Koreans did good. Great machine, just the support not so good, and maybe the planning is a little bit rough. And the people that ran the business, when someone says, listen, give us 2 units and we'll port all of our games, give them 2 units.
Yeah.
So we were, and I'm going to mention something here that will make you laugh harder. So me and Brent were tasked to find 2 commercial games, which we never played, out of the 28 that were released. So I was looking at the game list for this, Brent, because there's a lot of Korean titles, or stuff like that, or there aren't in English or whatever. But there's some decent stuff. But one of the games that sticks out, because I know it so well, Pinball Dreams is in here. So I had a look at Pinball Dreams. It runs great on this. So if this thing can run Pinball Dreams, for example, surely you could have ported any number of games to it, and it would have ran okay. But they sort of dropped the ball on this thing. And I will say, you've got educational titles on here. You've got action, you've got RPGs, lots of RPGs, some puzzle stuff, some platformers. So you've got a decent array. There's even a fighting game. Mm-hmm. There's some shmups. So there's a decent, I would say that, I'm thinking about the Wonder Swan, the black and white Wonder Swan, for example. If you import one of those, you're also doomed in terms of the language unless you get some kind of gimmicked up ROMs. But I think this probably would have more playable games than the Wonder Swan would, for example.
I played through about half the library.
Oh, really? That many?
Well, that's only like 14 games.
Well, that's still pretty good. You want to lead the dance here?
I will. And before I I picked my game and then started playing other stuff.
Yeah.
So that doesn't bode well for my game.
No, that's not good.
But I played. They had a political game that I couldn't understand because it was in Korean, but it was definitely some kind of you're running a political party type
Korean
thing.
Political intrigue. That's literally at the top of the news right now.
They had a Worms-style game where instead of playing as worms, you played as flip phones.
Wow. That sucks.
They had
cultural.
A couple RPGs, which of course I couldn't enjoy because I couldn't read the language. However, of the half the games I played, so say 7, 8, 9 games, a little over half, I could play and were pretty good. I was really impressed with the variety of games.
Yeah.
I was really impressed with the animations and the care that was put into some of the games. Now, obviously, some of the games were throwaways. And some of the games, obviously, I couldn't understand, so I couldn't appreciate them. Maybe they're great, maybe they're not. But I would say of the games I played, I really enjoyed playing about half of them. And I think that's pretty good for the sample size that I took.
Yeah.
Now, what I picked...
It's a good thing because the sample size ain't too big.
But what I picked was Raphael.
Yeah.
And
look at that beautiful screen that comes up. Just
well, that's the loading
Yeah,
screen. We're not worried about that. Raphael was actually, I didn't know this at the time I picked it, but after doing a little bit of digging, this is a translation of a game called Castle Excellent.
Yeah.
And I actually took a look at Castle Excellent, and I was like, this feels better than what I'm playing. But we're not going to dwell on that. We're going to talk about Raphael.
It's a pre-burial.
No, it really...
See, that's the kind of stuff that brings down the ultra event. When you bury your game before you get into it.
Raphael starts out with this incredible cutscene with these nice hand-drawn graphics.
Yeah.
That really pumps you up to play because you don't know what you're getting into. The title screen for this game is off the charts beautiful. It's got this nice field and everything.
They've got some real nice graphics on there, yeah.
And then the game starts, and you're like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah.
And I went into this not knowing what I was doing or what kind of game I was getting myself into. And this is a puzzle platformer, kind of. I don't know how else to describe it. So, yeah, I guess you have to put it as a puzzle platformer. You are a little blue-haired guy, boy, man, whatever, young lad, and you're working your way through the castle. And to do this, you have to collect keys to unlock doors. And the keys are color-coded. So if you have a yellow key, it goes to a yellow door. Everything in this castle wants to kill you. Everything. All the guards, all the animals, anything you come across, it wants you dead. And the puzzle part of this is you have to collect the keys and then basically find the door that they go in. In the beginning, it's very easy. You have a room, the starting screen, it's all flip screen. And the starting screen is, there's a yellow key that you could get, a yellow key you can't get, or a green key you can't get, and a yellow door. So obviously you have to maneuver and try to get that yellow key to go into the yellow door. Pretty simple stuff. I was not able to advance terribly far in this game, and I'll go over that in a second. But just knowing the concept, Aaron, and I know you played this, what did you think of this just as you powered it on for the first time?
This game, well, first of all, this has all the earmarks of like an old ZX game to me. You know,
except the looks.
Oh, the looks.
Way better.
Yeah, the looks are way better. But and it seems like me and Bo have recently played something on the Amiga that was very similar to this. It's a push around stuff, to jump up on stuff, to go through stuff. I wish my brain's tapioca. I would draw it back. But I've played these sorts of games before. I will say,
oh sure,
watching the opening and stuff, but this is not what I expected.
Yeah.
Once I started playing it, it's got that sort of. I'm not surprised that this came from the MSX. It has an MSXy. It's MS sexy, if you will. It's got that nice feel. I'm sorry, it just worked. It's got a nice feel to it. It's got a nice look to it. The puzzles. Since it's the puzzles are multiple screens that you go back and forth. And so because, I like my game, it's simpler if you just complete one screen and go to the next.
Right.
But these games that require you to go through a multitude of screens, it's a lot more of a challenge, that's for sure. But it is fun to be able to figure out how to get to places you couldn't get to before. That's the whole point of the game.
Yeah.
You can see the key you need. How do you get to it? Well, I've got to go up and around and go fall through the floor here and go through this door. Now that I've got the key, how do I get out of here? Where's the green door? How do I get there? So it was pretty challenging. I don't know if does this game just keep going? I never got to a breaking point. I just kept playing and playing until I just died.
Well,
I don't know if there are levels to this, or I don't know what it is. But
the castle is about 60, 65 screens large.
Holy smokes!
And each castle room has its own set of keys and doors and enemies. Now, Aaron, I know the first thing I did when I powered this on is I do what I always do is I try to find out what all my buttons do.
Yeah.
Because there's no manual for this that I could read.
No.
So I just got into it. And I was like, okay, this button jumps. And then I was dumbfounded because nothing else did anything.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, sure, one button game, that's fine. And I started working my way through the castle. And I was like, my God, there has to be something more I can do. I feel like I'm completely overwhelmed. The enemies are so fast, and you are, I mean, you're decently fast too, but your jump is this, hold the button, you'll hire, you'll go, and you've got full control of your jump, so you can wiggle around and stuff. But even with all that mobility, I never felt like I was in good enough control to dodge the things that were attacking me. Did you have that same kind of feeling?
Well, we should mention that. So let's talk about just briefly. Let's talk about GP32 emulation. You've only got two options outside of owning the GP32.
Sure.
One is MAME. Now, Pajaco helpfully took care of that part and it got me going on MAME. MAME is real buggy and slow, but you do get some sound on MAME. And then there's I don't want to say official, but there's another emulator called GEPEE32, That one plays way better.
Yeah.
But it has no sound, and it does have joystick controls. So I mostly went with that one. Now, with all that said, depending on which emulator you're going to play, will probably depend on the feel of this game. I tried to watch people that actually, and your game was a lot harder to find anyone that actually has video footage of somebody playing it.
Yeah.
I've seen people playing mine, but not yours. So in terms of how this feels on an actual GP32, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. But I didn't have any. I will say, playing this on GP32, I didn't have any trouble control-wise. It's just one of those games where your guy, there's so many obstacles and the heights, they stand pretty tall, and so you just have to clear them, and it's real easy to get caught. And they're also always moving, so it's real easy to get ran into while you're in the middle of a jump.
Well, my problem with it was the enemies are the same speed as you. So if you can get ahead of them, you're always going to stay ahead of them. But the collision detection on this is too good. You get no leeway. If you just barely brush up against the bad guy, you're dead, life's over. You start back.
Life's over.
You start back where you entered the screen.
Sure.
And that's going to be a problem, but we'll talk about that in a moment. And you start the game with 4 lives.
A weird number of lives.
And you pick up another one pretty early on. So basically you start the game with 5 lives. But you can go through those 5 lives in an instant trying to figure out a room.
Yeah.
And it's just annoying enough that makes you not want to play, and it doesn't have that drive factor, at least for me, that made me want to get better. I did get better just through pure putting myself out there and trying over and over and over. But I never felt comfortable. Even in the very opening levels, I never felt comfortable because the hit detection was so pixel perfect. It made jumping over the guys really difficult.
It's funny. I took this pretty well. Maybe I was just in the right mind state. I don't know what it was, but I had my controller rigged up. I played this with the Amiga, the mini Amiga controller. That's sort of like a knockoff of the CD32 controller. So it felt good in my hand on this one. And when I played it, I picked it up pretty quick. Like I said, I guess it's because I'd played something similar recently. And there are some scenes, you talked about how they match your speed. There's some scenes where you have to get down a small hallway and you have to run in front of someone. You have to wait till they go by you. And so it was fun to kind of outrace them to the door. And sometimes you're like, oh, I thought I had that key. And they run into you. There's also there's like an elevator in it. I got smushed on that one time. You got to be careful in the elevators. There's also an area where the floor drops out, but you have to use that. It's actually pretty cleverly done. I could see myself getting into a game like this. I wish it had a better save system or checkpoints or whatever. Because the problem is when you go through all these. I went through. I don't know how deeply you got in. So I probably got 10 rooms deep.
I got about 10 in.
And then, but when you die, it's real disheartening because then there's not like you can continue here. You can't continue here. You're boned.
Well, you can save at any point. So you could.
How?
There's a save feature in the game.
How do you activate it? I didn't even know.
Yeah, there is.
Oh, don't. Well, then I would have liked it more then.
So you can technically play one room over. Play it. If you die, just load your old save. Boy, that would be tedious because it's not easy to get in and out of saves on this.
Okay, that's great news. I did not know that.
But outside of that, it is once you're dead, that's it, all the way back to the beginning, and that is pretty harsh.
I will say something else that happens if you move a crate or something, and then you botch it, which I did over and over and over. If you leave the room and come back, it's all reset. Yeah, so you can't like soft lock it.
Oh, yes, you can.
No, not that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any doors you unlock are unlocked forever.
Yeah.
That's the benefit of that. I will say, later into the game, you do earn the other button. I don't even know if you noticed when you got it or not. Do you know what it does?
What did it do?
You do pick up a map at some point in the game.
I don't think I got that.
And you hit the B button, and it brings up the map.
Very good.
And the map is literally just squares.
A
And
map
it shows
would
where
help.
you've been and where you haven't been. That's all the detail it gives you. I would have liked to have seen that show how many keys are left in the room.
Oh, jeez.
All you'd have to do is have a number with color.
Yeah.
I don't think it would have been that hard. But it doesn't. So you're kind of left to explore this place. And unfortunately, if you see a key and you can physically get to it and you don't, because there are times when you get 2 or 3 keys in a room.
Yeah.
If you just get one key and then leave, you can soft lock because there are sections in the games where you will fall, and if you don't have a key to get out that you should have picked up elsewhere, there's no getting out of it. You can't die to reset yourself back where you came into the room. So that's really bad game design. And I've got to take points off for it because it's just, you can't do that.
How did this fare against the MSX one?
The MSX one,
What was that one called again?
Castle Excellent.
Okay, yeah.
Is a...
Excellent.
Imagine if the screens were smaller.
Yeah.
And obviously the graphics not as detailed, but it didn't have 4 or 5 enemies at the screen at one time. It was almost like, here you are, here's the one enemy you have to worry about, and here's the key you have to get. So it was less of a puzzler, in my opinion, even though all the puzzles are sort of still there, and more just a platformer. Because you couldn't look ahead a lot. It was all just tight on one screen.
Very good. So I'm going to try that once I've got the MSX. I've never played it.
That overall, Aaron, I'll have to say, this was more frustrating than fun for me.
Yeah.
And normally, I kind of dig these type of games.
Yeah.
And it could totally just be I wasn't in the mood for it. But I'll have to say, this was not the best showing I had on the GP32.
Well, they can't all be winners, the Brent. You can't pick a winner every time. By the way, before we get into the review here, and in terms of getting these games to purchase for your GP32, good luck.
Yeah.
I didn't see one of our games, and also the games I did see were going for hundreds of dollars, sometimes thousands of dollars, which we'll get into. We did get one review on this, the Brent. It's from the usual suspect, the King Dong of reviews, Pajako, 6502. He chimes in. Emulation of the GP32 isn't great, and GP32 ran too fast, which it did not for us. I will say that.
You can adjust the frame skip. That helps a lot.
Whereas MAME ran a little slowly, but was more playable. So I personally played on MAME. I will jump in here. You can change how your frame skip. I changed it to 0 frame skip, and it ran perfect for me. I mean, as perfect as I thought it should.
I kept it at 1.
Yeah.
Not because of it not being smooth, but because it did slow down the game a little bit, which I greatly appreciated.
So anyway, to carry on
Fake
with this,
slowdown, I understand. But
with Pajaka's review here. So I was playing this and thinking how much it reminded me of Castle Excellent, aka the Castle in MSX. So looking it up, I found that Raphael is allegedly a port of that game. Castle Excellent is a fun puzzle platformer that, while I still need to complete, is a fun game and one I will load up and play from time to time. So getting a chance to play a modernized version was quite interesting. In giving the game better graphics and slightly irritating sound, Raphael manages to lose some of the charm and appeal of the original. It might have been more enjoyable if you don't know Castle Excellent, but to me this ended up feeling like a version of Manic Miner they did for the Amiga, although not quite as bad as that, which I can understand where he's coming from there. Yep, it's perfectly playable. It has all the elements of the 8-bit versions, but it's lacking that special something that makes me want to play this more. Raphael's saving grace is that you can save the game at will. Why did everybody know about that but me? And come back when you die. Sadly, however, I managed to soft lock the game with no way to off myself, and I had to restart the emulation.
I know exactly what he's talking about.
And save my game, and my save game went with it. Oh, that's tough. A good effort, but not quite hitting the mark for me. 6 out of 10. So when he rebooted that thing, I guess Maine didn't save it. That's a problem.
That's when you got to start using the old save state.
What did you use? You used the thing I used, right? GP32. Yeah, that's what I figured. Again, you're not going to find this one online, at least, and maybe if you looked at like South Korean eBay, if such a thing exists.
It does, I'm sure.
But I did not.
I believe, Aaron, you told me this cost $40 dues on release.
I think that's what I read, which that was somewhere in the ballpark of what these were costing at the time.
I think for 2002, I think that would have been a little much for this game.
Yeah, but I mean, I think there's something there, especially with a save. There's fun to be had. But I mean, this is the kind of game you can play on a lot of other systems. But this one I thought it was attractive, and it was okay. Again, we didn't play it with sound, so I didn't get to hear the sound.
I can't comment on the sound because I watched the videos with it, but I don't think that's fair to rate it off that.
Right on.
Aaron, what did you bring to the table?
You know me, when we play these some more obscure machines, I like to go big or go home. So I went big this time. With probably what's considered the king dong of the GP32 actual release games. The very last one released, I might add, for the Game Park GP32, Blue Angelo, developed by Virtual Spaghetti and published by Shibuya Interactive. So get this. I was on French websites a lot this week, if you can believe it, because this Shibuya Interactive based in France. All right, so we'll get into this. This was released in December 16th, 2004. So like I said, this is the last game released. Allegedly, they only made 500 copies of this.
Woo!
So if you've got this, you're doing good. So here we go with this. And I went down this wormhole, and we're going to get... so I'm going to try to explain...
There was a lot more about your game than my game.
Well, I mean, I really dug in. So the game was created, I think, by Adriano Baglio, and who I think...
You've just insulted.
Well, I don't know where Adriano is from, but I think he's... in France when he did this, but I don't know. And I don't know if he's French. That sounds more like a Spanish name, but maybe he's French.
When you pronounce it, it sounded like some derelict language.
So I looked all over to try to find information on Shibuya Interactive, and I can't find nothing on that company. Nothing. And I can't find anything on Virtual Spaghetti either. All right, so I looked all over. So... by the time this came out, the GP32 was in the tank.
Yeah.
Okay, they were done. And so, immediately, there was a Game Boy Advance version that's planned for a European release. Okay? So here was the plan. This game was to come out, there would be a European release of the GP32, and then they would release the Game Boy Advance version somewhere down the line. And the Game Boy Advance version exists in some capacity, unfinished capacity. but it was never finished. And people lament this, apparently, quite a bit. So, the storyline in this is another one. Earth is very violent, and humans have progressed to a point where a large number of the population have left the planet to go colonize and be violent in other parts of the galaxy, right? One of the planets that they find, Lyra, has been afflicted by monsters and demons.
As they are.
The scientists on Lyra create a fighter of their own. That's your guy, by the way.
Yep.
In an effort to take care of any of the threats on the planet. Your guy doesn't eat or drink, and he has only a year to live. And he's called Creature 331 or Blue Angelo. I'd go with Blue Angelo, by the way.
I don't know.
If it was Creature L33T, like, that'd be cool, but that's not. See, they should have called me. I would have made this guy better. It's funny in the wiki they mentioned the subtitle of this is Angels from the Shrine.
Yes.
That's actually mentioned in the backstory. The backstory is pretty wacky when you get into it. But long story short, your guy is there to take care of these bad guys, okay? And by the way, as you go through this game, you can unlock different people to play. You can actually have 4 different characters that you can take through the game if you go through it, which, by the way, I did not unlock any characters, just an FYI. You can also, so what is your goal in this? You've got to collect the 4 ability spears. Okay, the ability spears can give you power: super dash, super jump, super slide, and double jump. And that's where you're going for. They're different colors. And as you go through the game, you can pick up these various pickups. Now, let's talk about the game itself. Okay.
Well, one thing I want to jump in and mention real quick.
Jump in.
You can play this game in English.
Yes.
Which is the way that Aaron is able to tell you about the backstory and stuff. This is one of the games that had probably 8 languages that you could choose from, English being one of them.
Yes, and the English in this is just what is as wacky as you would expect.
Yeah, I mean,
which makes me wonder how this was done. I mean, even in France, they would have gotten done. This was very much written in like Asian English, basically, like the all our bases type English. So I don't know what the scoop is on this. So anyway, your Blue Angelo is this guy, and he walks around, and this is basically, I guess you would call this a platforming. How would you categorize this? A scrolling adventure game?
It's a Metroidvania.
Well, I mean,
sorta.
Yeah. The thing is, Metroidvanias require you to backtrack a lot. I don't know how much. There's not a ton of backtracking.
There's
in this.
some.
There's some, which will explain why. So when you start the game up here, you've got your guy, and there's a cool scene at the beginning. The opening of this is outstanding.
Yeah, it's good.
Because it's multiplanar. This thing the graphics were unbelievable at the very beginning.
Yeah.
There's a thing where you get beamed up you beam down to the land where you're going to start fighting. It's an awesome scene, and they put more care into that than probably any other scene in the game. It looks great. There's all sorts of different planes. Once you've actually gotten your guy into the game, you walk around and you fight. You've got a button to jump and a button to fight. And there's also another button you'll use for like your super stuff when you get them, which I never got anything, so I don't know how that goes. Because I will tell you, this game, I don't want to say the game's too hard. It's not. But the point I got too hard, and I couldn't get past it.
Did you get stuck on a boss?
No, I didn't get stuck on a boss. So you start the game, you run through. Your guy has like basically a staff. I guess is the best thing you can call it.
Yeah, it's a bow staff.
And you go through and you use this thing to fight. Now this game has combos. If you're tapping the button the right way, or certain maneuvers will give you different combos, right?
Yeah.
And you can go in there and just tap, and you'll be fine as you go through. You start off fighting like humanoid figures. Bats are quite popular in this game. And as you roll through it, you're going up and down platforms. And eventually you'll come to a place where there's a fork in the level. You go left or right. If you go left, you go into this area where you hop up on like a couple things. And this is like literally a save point. If you go in here, the game is saved. And you also are fully healed. And I thought to myself, man, this is great. This is pretty well in. I could go and take care of business. if you go right, eventually you go to the first boss. It's a giant spider you fight. Giant spider, he killed me the first time, but I figured him out the second time around and took care of it. I mean, he's a big sprite. You know, he moves around. I wouldn't call him the all-time classic bad guy, but he's a good-looking guy. And then when once you take him out, he's got a lady trapped on his webs back there.
Sure.
You know how they are. Once you take him out, you rescue the who and she promptly leaves. So I don't know. And there's never really any explanation as to what the heck just happened.
You forgot the best part of that whole conversation. When you first save her, she's like, blah, 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 blah.
Oh yeah.
And your dude's like, I don't know what you're saying. She's like, woo, 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 woo. She's like, all right, you understand now. And your guy's like, oh, cool, I can understand you. And the chick's like, how are you talking? You have no mouth. And then she's like, all right, peace out.
He explains how he was talking. Oh, by the way, someone in the chat, thank you, Gatto, says Adriano Bago is Italian. There you go. That does explain the name. So there you go. So once you get past the first boss, it's time to move on. The second area of this game is I think it's a lot more tricky. You start out in the outdoors, but this game just sort of goes on in the same vein. You're fighting bats. You're fighting these humanoid guys, and it almost feels like some of the levels almost have a flashback feel to them. The way they're structured, not the way they play, but you remember how there were lots of levels of falling and jumping up and jumping down. There was that sort of thing. I mean, and eventually I get to a point where I go all the way up a level, fall all the way down a level, and then get jumped by a million things and murdered. That's a double boss. So I guess that was the second boss that killed me. Did you get past that guy?
Well, I'll talk about my gameplay experience here in a second.
Go ahead. Jump in right now.
Well, so remember how I mentioned that on my game, it was a one-button game?
Yeah.
Well, I was convinced the system was a one-button system.
Real good.
So when I went into this game, I didn't know how to jump. All I could do was attack.
You idiot.
So I was playing it, right? And I made it through the first boss without jumping. Which, when you play the game, you're like, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
First of all, how'd you kill the first boss
You're
without
kidding
jumping?
me. You got to him without jumping
Without
at all?
jumping.
I guess there's more falling than
There was a
jumping.
lot of falling. But jumping would have been a lot easier to kill those bats later on, I found out.
Yeah.
So, after you kill that one boss, after the next room that you go into, or very soon afterwards, you have to jump.
Yeah.
And I was like,
you have to go up.
I was like, what in the world? How am I supposed to do this? I don't know how to jump. So I stopped. I redid everything. I figured out what was going on. So now I could jump. Well, at that point in the game, I quit your game. Went back to my game because now I knew it was the two-button system.
Yeah.
And that's when I played my game again, and the second button still didn't do anything. I was so confused. But on Blue Angelo, this is a really good game. It's a
okay, go
no,
ahead.
it's a really good game. There is a ton of exploration, especially when you can jump. And it has passages, like I never found the save room that you were talking about. Because
you didn't go left.
Because, among other things.
Also, you had to jump up to get to the save area.
So,
you idiot.
So, I went pretty far into the game and just kind of was taking in the ambiance. The sprites that you attack in this thing are huge.
Yeah, they're big.
They're all huge. They're big heads that will float down. Now, one thing I don't like is the floating enemies will float through scenery, through platforms, and they can really take some cheap angles.
The bats are particularly annoying.
Well, there were enemies that I thought that were far more annoying than the bats. But yes, that was a problem too. You can farm in this game. Right after the spider, there's a guy that you kill. It takes like 3 hits, and he gives a crap ton of experience.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. If you could sit there and just do it, go off and
I
just
went back and forth and gained like 3 levels. There's levels in the game.
Oh, that's how you got further.
There's a magic system in the game.
Yeah.
there are items in the game that you pick up. Like I picked up
Power spears.
a bracer. No, I mean
yeah,
like
the armor.
equipment.
Yeah.
That gives you like extra stats. I unfortunately, having flip-flopped through these games the way I did, and I'm playing so many, I did not put the time into this that I needed to. But the game is certainly good enough that I'm going to go back and put more time into it.
Did you get past the second set of bosses at the bottom of the staircase?
No, but I didn't go that way.
Okay. I didn't know there was another way to go.
Well, that's what because when you were talking about, because I went up the tower and down the tower.
Yeah.
But then I didn't get to a stair. I didn't go to a staircase. I went through like a cave area.
Okay.
So that's why I think this is you can classify this as a Metroidvania because it's got equipment, it's got magic, some kind of magic system. It's got multiple bosses. It does have backtracking.
It's all there. To go back. I had to go back. I would get paranoid and go all the way back to the save point, save, and then go all the way back to where I was. And of course, everything reappears.
Yes. Yeah. The enemies that you kill stay dead as long as you're on that screen, but as soon as you leave that screen, everything repopulates. Not my favorite way of handling enemies.
No.
But, it's fine. This is a really deep game. I tried looking for a complete run of this because I would have loved to have seen it.
Yeah.
Good
luck.
I don't know if it's out there. I'm sure it is in some capacity, but I'm kind of glad I didn't find it. Although I would have liked to have seen it so I could talk more about it on the show. But I'm glad I'm not spoiled because I'm going to go through this. I might not take it to completion, and I might have to use save states to do it, but I'm going to try to full complete it.
Well, I was looking around to find a playthrough or something online. There's the only things I saw were some people that literally had shot over the shoulder of a guy playing a little bit, for like a minute, and someone had taken the MAME emulation and used it, or an old version of GP. I think I haven't uploaded it yet, but I'll probably upload the footage I took because it's the freshest thing out there. It's the best looking, it's the best running. But it's got no sound.
It's what you're seeing right now if you're watching it at home.
We recorded, I think both these are what we recorded, weren't they? So this footage doesn't exist. So I'm guessing not too many people have even bothered. But this game, there are people that want to play this game for sure. I know that. And I can tell you, I didn't have any glitches or anything happen. It's just there's no sound. That's the bad part. But otherwise,
the game is hard.
Yeah, it's a hard game, but it's fun. I know as you go forward, you can get a lot more combo action than you start off at the beginning. And so I just wasn't good enough to get far enough into this game to experience some of the better stuff.
Right.
Which sucks, because I want to. But yeah, I think this is I think it's also an interesting looking game.
Yes.
They've done a good job. There's a lot of kind of pastel, kind of pinks and grays and some purples in it that make it. I like the earlier levels. Like I said, there's some beautiful, brilliantly looking backgrounds in this as well. Your guy looks pretty neat. He doesn't look human. He looks like a weird sort of ethereal, I don't know what you would call robot, human hybrid, humanoid. He looks cool, and his moves are good. The bad guys, this does have that Game Boy Advanced feeling bad guys. Like they're sort of detailed, but they're not like super detailed. There's not a ton of them that I saw, but they looked okay.
I don't know, man. Some of the enemies I thought had remarkable detail.
Some did. Some have more than others. But for the most part, I thought this was a pretty sweet little game. I know it's in demand. I was reading that if you could pick this game up, here's where I died, by the way, if you're watching the video footage. The double plant eyeballs of death. I've heard this thing goes for over $1,000 type game.
Whew.
Yeah, so it's an expensive game. So just a little bit of whackery here. A few years ago, there was a Kickstarter, and by the way, the Kickstarter's been removed. I tried to look for it, but there was a reboot considered. It was a Kickstarter to make a PC version of this, and they were going to redo all the graphics and stuff in the Unity 2D engine to redo all the graphics. And it was going to be completely a whole different game from the GP32 version. Now, it was ran by an outfit called Vetasoft. and it was and the company was founded by Adriano and Masasima Baggio, just like the guys that made the game, the guy. So, but it took me the longest time to figure out who made the game, like because I couldn't tell if people were getting. This is the way when you do research on this stuff, I couldn't tell if this was actually made by some guys in France or Italy, or this was made in Japan or Korea, and these guys were the guys responsible for the Kickstarter. And even now, I can't give you 100% proof of this. I've tried to find out, but as far as I can tell, these are the guys. What throws me is the English translation. I can't figure out why it's so. It doesn't seem like
it seems broken.
It seems like the RO bases belong to us sort of translation. So don't. I mean, the threads I was following on this were askew. They were tough to follow. So you may hear otherwise, but I'm giving you the best I could give you. But the Kickstarter failed, by the way. It didn't come close.
Right. I figured that much. Did you see where this was coming out for the GBA?
Yeah, I mentioned that.
It was 80% complete. Well, the guy trying to hype up the Kickstarter released the unfinished GPA ROMs.
Yeah.
So you can play it, but it's far from finished.
There's 2 sets of different ROMs that were neither finished.
Yeah.
But if you look at those, they have a distinct look. They look different from the game.
They do.
This game reminds me something like the GP32 game. It sort of reminds me in the way that the screens flow of something like Cat Ash. Sometimes the screens scroll and sometimes they flip. You're going to leave one screen, it's going to flip to another screen. The GBA one, for what I could tell, was all smooth scrolling across the entire game. So but
it has some.
I did not try it.
It has that. The GP32 version has the same thing as Metroid. You might have a screen that scrolls left and right for a long, long time, or up and down for a long, long time. But eventually, you're going to get to a door that will flip screen, and it even has the in-between sections, because you'll get to a door that will flip screen to a single screen room that you just walk through, and then it opens up to the next area. It's very Metroid-like.
But I did enjoy the game. And I did enjoy the graphics, and I did find someone the over-the-shoulder view to hear the sound. It sounded okay. You can't judge it that way, so I'm gonna hold off on the sound. But this does give you an idea of the capabilities of this little machine.
Yeah.
Because this is a game that would, I mean,
this was very impressive.
You'd be hard pressed to find a GBA game that was of the graphical fidelity of this.
Well,
there were some.
No, there were plenty of GBA games that looked this good.
You think?
Yeah.
Give me an example.
Street Fighter 2 Alpha.
Well, that's a different type of game, though, isn't it? That didn't have scrolling. That didn't have multiplayer.
It had scrolling.
Not like this.
I'm just saying that game, the GBA could definitely do these graphics.
Well, I'm not saying this is better than GBA, but I'm saying this system had enough under the hood to handle, at the bare minimum, top shelf GBA graphics. There you go.
I will say that this system, I was very surprised, especially when the first few games I looked at were shovelware, very bad, very low effort games. That something of this quality could be literally hidden away, tucked away on the GP32 is astonishing.
Yeah, and the thing is, I will say, despite the emulator shortcomings, this can absolutely be played probably to completion on that emulator.
I'm going to find out.
And if you end up doing it, make sure you record it. We did. By the way, I did find one review in a French magazine. The problem is I couldn't identify the magazine. But it did get an 8 out of 10 on the one review I saw, so I'll give it that. We'll turn to Pajaka for something more definitive here. He says, again, playing this mainly on MAME, so the emulation was a little slow. Blue Angelo is not an adult movie, much to my disappointment, but it is instead a pretty fun but hard platform with some minor RPG elements. I didn't get too far in this, but played for about an hour and really enjoyed what I played, even if it did kick my butt. The story, if you could ignore some of the hilarious translations, is for me the classic old school video game, way too over the top, but compelling enough that I want to find out what happens. So it feels a bit like Strider with a bit of Turrican thrown in. Some excellent graphics and gameplay, but there were 1 or 2 bits that took the sheen off a little. For one, the hitboxes are a little too big, so taking damage from things you can't avoid is a pain at times. You couldn't break animation, so if you accidentally attack the wrong direction, you can't turn around until you're finished with your move. And in that time, you can take a hit from behind. That's another GBA special. That's I used to have in a while.
I don't know where you get that.
Oh, yeah. Some reusable save points make the game a bit easier, but you have to hunt for them, and only with one life. If you haven't saved it in a while, you'll be replaying large chunks of the game if you are not careful. It's a shame I can't play this properly at the moment, as I think I could really get into this over a few evenings. Worth playing if you can. Maybe worth picking up a GP32 for 8 out of 10. I would not do that. Unless you're, like I said,
unless you're flush with cash.
Me and Brent looked up what GP32s are going for, and a boxed one is going to run you somewhere over $500.
Yeah. And then this game alone is another $1,000.
Well, if you can find it.
Yeah.
You know, if you consider that let's say that take them at their word and they made 500 of these worldwide, the chances of one coming up is pretty slim.
Yeah.
And the price on it's going to, because people know about it, you know.
Yeah.
But you could get a loose GP32 of different, depending on the model. You're still going up into the hundreds of dollars for one of these things. So it's not a cheap date. But I will say, I really enjoyed looking into this thing because I didn't know much about the original GP32, having the GP2X. I didn't look much into it. But it's a pretty capable little machine. It's a shame that Game Park was so, so skewed. And also the fact that the market loosened up when they released this, that probably didn't help them. You know, but the fact that listen, I would have imported GP2X and people would have imported GP32 if it wasn't for the emulation. So the fact that there were all, by the way, some decent games on it.
Yeah.
It's sort of a surprise.
Yeah.
You know, at least one decent game. And like I said, I looked at some of the other ones. I looked at, there was a great guy, the Gannon sisters had a game on this machine as well that looked quite nice. I almost picked that one, but I had trouble getting it to work with the emulator. But it looked good too. So there was some stuff we'd heard of. And if you turn loose Team 17, a couple other big players get in there, you might have had something. But I think this thing was probably doomed for Jump Street just because it's a Korean-based company selling things to Korea. I don't think they necessarily started out thinking about distributing the game machine over here, and maybe that was their downfall. They probably didn't think there'd be a market for it, if you think about it, because we had other stuff. So they didn't understand what they'd actually had there, which is an emulation device that would appeal to the hardcores.
You run into a lot of illegal issues.
Well,
absolutely.
It's a
you know where there's no legal issues, Aaron?
I don't know.
The wheel.
Oh, okay. Sounds good to me,
Aaron,
man.
what did you add to the wheel?
Oh, man. Listen, it's been a while, everybody. Hold on, I'm going to pull it out. Look at this. Here it is, everybody. If it comes up, it's chat choice. So the people in chat, be ready to go. Be ready to be called on a moment's notice. We also pulled one out here from our good buddy Chris Folds, the healthiest man I know, by the way. Play as a wizard. That's all it says. So this is a game where you play as a wizard. That sounds good to me, man.
And the Retro Rewind?
That's it. That's all I put on there.
You put up Retro Rewind on there.
Oh, team fighting. Team fighting. I forgot about that one.
Yeah, it has been a couple hours. Here we go.
Me dumb. Fight too much. Make brain hurt. Anything but chat choice. Oh, sorry, chat.
It looks like, Aaron, we have hit the Retro Rewind piece. Team fighting.
It couldn't be all those pinball pieces I've been putting on it for weeks. Team fighting. I think you looked this up. We did this first at around episode 250.
It's been about 100 episodes.
What episode are we on now?
I don't know.
Are we on 400 yet?
No,
Did we beat that?
no.
I don't know where we're at, but we did this a few years ago. Team fighting. Did we say ground rules for this, Brent? Because the last show we did, I sort of fudged the rules on it a little bit. So team fighting, yeah.
You fudging the rules, I don't believe it.
Yeah, so we're going to pick games where you have a team that you fight with, right? That's the plan.
That's it.
All right, on any system that we want. So that'll be fun. So let's talk about what we got coming up in the next edition of the Retro Rotation. This will be, Team Fighting will be coming up in 2 weeks, Brent, 2 weeks from now, because next week we're going to slam hard back to the R. Sinclair, the old ZX. This is one that's been a long time coming. I've heard a lot about this game, and I never played it. We're going to be filming next Tuesday, March 18th. We're going to move up a couple days, so we'll be at town at the Louisville Arcade Expo. But Tuesday, March 18th, please come around when we'll be playing Mr. Wimpy.
I'm surprised you got your own game,
Mr.
Aaron.
Wimpy. Hey, I'll gladly pay you on Tuesday for a hamburger today, if you know what I mean. That'll be March 18th, and then the following Sunday we'll be back with ARG Presents, where we'll be playing team fighting. That'll be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to that. Any final thoughts the Brent takes to the house?
Nope.
All right. We will see you on Tuesday. We'll gladly pay you Tuesday. Think about it. It all works out if you check out Mr. Wimpy. Until then, have a good week. Bye-bye.
We got it going. With a spin of the wheel, we'll uncover faith and stream it to you all in one take. We tend to be loud and we fight quite a bit, but it's an unscripted show, so you get what you get. If we stopped it right now and we just walked